All right, well, welcome to the question and answer show on Sunday at May the 3rd. And I may have one or two people come in. I've got one now, so we'll see how it goes. And let's switch over here and unmute.
Hello,
All
is
right,
that
yeah,
any better?
I got you back on. I had to do the intro. I just started recording.
Okay, how's my sound?
That sounds a lot better.
Okay, all right, great.
Yeah, you're not doing any echo now, and it's just the two of us, so we can. Let me go back over to the empire. So you wanted to know a little bit about the empires and the beast, as if it was something to do with a religious empire. And what I was going to point out was that the religious empire is just a part of the religious part is part of the empire, but empires are military because you can clearly see that there's weapons involved, and the religious is just as someone that may exert control within the empire, but they're not the definition or the context of the empire. Go ahead.
Mm. Okay, I want to ask you a question then. The first beast, it says, and they worship the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? That's Revelation 13:4. So my question is, who is they, and who are they worshiping?
All right. Well, keep in mind all this stuff is connected. 13 is connected to 12, connected to 11, which is connected back to chapter 7 and 6 and so forth, and forward as well, because if you go forward to chapter 14, that's where you see your conquerors. So when you start in 13, it starts out that there's 3 beasts conquered. Actually, there's 4, but let's get to that later. It starts out that there's 3 beasts conquered, and if there's 3 beasts conquered, then how come it calls it the first beast? In my Bible, it doesn't actually say it's the first beast, because it's kind of a paradox. It is, but it isn't. How does yours say it? Does it say red beast, first beast, or how does it start at?
Which I
I
quoted Revelation 13:4.
Okay, but in 13:1, does it start out first beast or red beast or conquering beast, or how does it start out?
Says, it's a King James version,
right.
And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up of the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns.
All right. Now, wait a minute. It said a beast. It didn't say first beast.
A.
Okay. You said first beast.
Gotcha.
The text does not say
I
first
did.
beast. Okay. Now, if you go on.
I'm just thinking in terms. Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, I was just thinking in Revelation 13, there's only 2 beasts being talked about. So I didn't mean to give it officially a title of a first beast, but just the first beast that they were talking about in this particular chapter.
All right, but look at this. Look at this. Now go on up, and you'll notice when you get to, was it 12 or so, it says a second beast. Doesn't it say that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if it says second beast up there, then you would assume that 13:1 was the first beast.
Right.
Correct? All right. Except that there's 3 beasts in control. So really, it is the first beast for the matter of. In other words, it can't explain what it really is, so it just says a beast. Well, the a beast, if you look at it closely and go back to Daniel chapter 7, here's the explanation. If you go back to Daniel chapter 7, that's just a mini summary of what's in Revelation, and it starts out, you've got 4 beasts. However, there's a beast that conquers a beast that conquers a beast, and then it works up to 4 beasts. The point is, it starts out as the first beast. When that beast conquers another beast, then it becomes the second beast. When it conquers another beast, then it becomes the third, and another, it becomes the 4th beast. The 4th beast was the first beast. You see?
Okay, so you're saying that the 4th beast has subsumed all the other beasts.
Well, it conquers them. So, but when it starts, it's the first beast. In chapter 7, of course, it just talks about the 4th beast. It really doesn't tell you, okay, well, who was the first beast? All right, now here, let's get to the first beast.
Okay.
What does the first beast actually define in Revelation? Okay, well, you got to back up. If you back up to find that first beast says to find, where are you going to find that first beast? You see?
I'm not sure. I'll have to.
Exactly. That was my logic. When I was looking at this, I spent so much time on this. It was crazy because I looked at that and I said, okay, but you know what I'm saying? Where's the first beast? So I went back to Daniel chapter 7, and I figured that out, that the first was the first, and then it became the second, third, and fourth, and then it deals with the fourth. And then I was like, okay, but who's the first? Well, what does it say? Well, it says that you have the lion, the leopard, and the bear. Okay, well, who's the lion? It describes it. If you go back to Daniel chapter 7, I could pull it up here in my Bible. I'm not looking at it, but I recall it because I've studied it so much. It starts out with the lion, and it comes in with 2 wings of an eagle, and it stands up with the voice of a man. Well, that is the 2 wings of an eagle. Where do we know that from? Well, we should know who the lion is, the Lion of Judah. So who are the 2 wings of an eagle represented by the Lion of Judah, which is Christ? Who are the 2 wings of an eagle? If you go back, you'll figure that out, that the first time that's mentioned is actually in Exodus when they were at or just approaching Mount Sinai. He says, I brought you out on 2 wings of an eagle. And so, okay, 2 wings of an eagle is protecting his people who came out of Egypt based on a prophecy. The prophecy came from where? The prophecy of them coming out of Egypt, if you recall, goes all the way back to Genesis. It's 15:13, as I recall. It's actually Christ back there because it's Christ the shield. So if you go back to 15:1, that's Christ the shield speaking from the previous chapter, 14, who is Melchizedek, who is this King of Kings, the King of Peace, King of Salem. If you look over in Hebrews chapter 7, it really explains it. I don't know why there's even an argument, but there is an argument because people don't understand who the shield is in Genesis 15:1. There's no change of who's talking from chapter 14 of Genesis to chapter 15, but it starts out just saying the Lord, you know, so it just puts this basic term in there. But just before that, it was talking about Melchizedek. Well, Melchizedek is the Lord. So I looked at that and I said, okay, so the shield, who is the shield protecting Abraham or promising himself to protect Abraham? And what does it say? I will be your exceedingly great reward. Well, it can't be a man can't promise himself to be a reward to Abraham and to promise to protect Abraham all his life. It can't be a man. That would be outrageous for a man to say something like that. So I looked up shield. I just got to go to this because you got to get the whole concept because it ties into Revelation. So you got to kind of understand it because we're going to go to this chapter 17, by the way. And chapter 17, Revelation, is where all this is going to click when we get to 17. All right, so I looked at this shield and I said, okay, well, who is the shield? So I started doing a topical on the shield. Everybody knows Christ the rock It's in, was it 1 Corinthians 10:4, it mentions Christ the rock. So they, pastors have taught on that, but they've never taught on Christ the shield. There's almost nothing. If you go look on YouTube or even just Google it, you'll find almost nothing on Christ the shield. In fact, my video is probably the top one in Google still, because the people just don't connect the dots. But here's the connection. If you look at, do a topical on shield, who the shield person is or entity is, you won't find but one verse in the whole Bible that connects Christ the shield to Christ the rock, to Christ the king of, or the redeemer, the king of salvation, or horn. And it uses the word horn in Psalms quite a bit. So that one verse is on my chart. I've got a chart called The Rock Was Christ. In fact, let's just look at it, because this is most underused document here. Here, let me just find it, because I got a lot of charts here. But if you go and look up My Rock Was Christ, this is really where you have to start. You got to understand the connections from Genesis all the way to Revelation. If you don't get those connections, you'll never understand prophecy. You'll never be able to connect the dots. All right, here's My Rock Was Christ. Oops. All right, let's get a little bigger. Well, I need a little bigger than that. So let's go up. All right, now the rock was Christ. I'm sure you can see that pretty well. All right, so you see here, 1 Corinthians 10:4, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them. Really, a spiritual rock that followed them. Okay, they're talking about the Jacob's pillar stone here. It was Jacob's pillar stone that they had in Egypt, which all came about when Jacob struggled with the angel, and the angel said that Jacob struggled with, that was probably Genesis 28, something like that. He says, I am the God of that stone that you consecrate. Remember the ladder of when Jacob had the vision of the ladder to heaven? Way back in Genesis. He laid down and he had a vision of the ladder of heaven. Well, he had a vision. And he said he saw angels going up and down the ladder of heaven. So everybody knows that. And then a little bit later, he struggled with the angel. And the angel, if you look at that again, it starts out saying he struggled with, or he met a man or something like that. But then it changes to angel. And then the angel states, I am that, after he won the struggle, or after he injured his leg or whatever. He says, I am the God of the house of God that you consecrated at Bethel, and Bethel just means house of God. So, all right, what angel can call himself God? Think about it. What angel is defined as a man, defined as an angel, and then also defined as a God? There's only one. It's Christ. Yeshua. It's only one. It can't be anybody else. So that angel he struggled with basically is telling you he was Christ. Now, the entity we would call him at that point, of course, is not Christ, but we would call him, actually the word Jehovah is used by Abraham when he sacrifices Isaac. He uses that term Jehovah Jireh, and everybody knows that. There's songs written with Jehovah Jireh. And that Jehovah is that same tetragrammaton, YHVH is the way it should be, which is really pronounced Yehovah by our best guess. Yehovah is how we should pronounce it. And that comes from Dr. Jones. But anyway, so we can confirm then that Christ was back in Genesis, and that's who the spiritual rock was that followed them. In other words, he brought them out according to the prophecy in Genesis 15:13. So that was Yehovah speaking to Abraham, gave him a prophecy that he was going to bring his children out, and then he brought his children out after 430 years, and that's where this thing comes from. But how do we connect that back? Well, this is my topical study. And if you go over here to, I should probably make, I don't know, is that too big? Or does that look okay?
No, it's fine.
It's
Yeah,
fine.
it looks
Okay.
okay.
Well, in 2 Samuel 22:2, here's where you'll find it. It starts out, Lord is my rock. And then verse 3, God of my, and of course, this is for our Fenton. The King James will read it slightly different. God of my rock, my salvation, my tower, and it uses that multiple times. Refuge, Savior, who is a rock but our Yehovah, you see? God of rock, God of my salvation, the God of Israel said, the rock of Israel spoke to me. You see what I'm saying? Also, second Samuel chapter 22. All right. The God of Israel said, the rock of Israel, okay, as a guide to the reverence of Yahweh. Well, I think we should get it then, that this rock, and it's also in 1 Samuel, there's no rock like our Yahweh. And stone pillar, that's the stone pillar that he was laying on a rock. That was his pillow. It starts out, it was a pillow. He stood it up and made a pillar, and then he consecrated it with oil, and then we know it as Jacob's pillar stone. And there it is mentioned right here in Samuel, and then it's connected to the dots. And where's the shield? This is duplicated. If you go up to Psalms, there you go. Psalms chapter 18. This is the duplication, pretty much exact duplication, except it uses slightly different terms. Christ is my rock. Who is rock? Okay, that's a quote to Deuteronomy. And then Isaiah, Christ lives and blessed is my rock. You see. All right. Christ, my Redeemer, my high rock. Okay, and then back to Psalms. Set me upon his rock. I cried to my rock. Be my strong rock. You are my rock. You have redeemed me. So the rock is the Redeemer. And Jacob mentions in, I think it's chapter 48 in Genesis, about being redeemed. Okay. Set feet about a rock. I'll speak to my rock. Lead me to the rock. He's the only rock, salvation, my defense. He is only my rock, my salvation, my fortress. Christ is my salvation and my glory. The rock of my, all this is in Psalms, my refuge and force, which connects to Jeremiah. You are my rock and force. Okay. He split the rocks in the desert and quenched their thirst with rushing streams. How about that? So they actually got water out of 3 different sources. One of the sources was Jacob's pillar stone. They had Jacob's pillar stone with them when they came out of Egypt. And then at one point, Moses would tap the pillar stone and it would give them a small stream of water. At another point, he would tap rocks and they would come out of the cliffs. And then the big one was the rock of Oreb when they were at Mount Sinai, or actually at Mount Oreb, which is just across from Mount Sinai. He claved the rock in the wilderness. That's when he got a river that flowed out and became it became a lake. So that's a lot more water. And you can tell that if you just look at these closely. He split the rocks in the desert. We said that one. He brought streams out also out of the rock like rivers. All right, when it's talking about river, it's talking about the rock of Oreb. He smote the rock, okay, and there's also 12 springs. Christ was their rock and Yehovah their Redeemer. Well, that kind of connects the dots. And then there's more connections in Deuteronomy, Isaiah, with honey out of the rock, that's in Isaiah. And then you have Job, the rock of my salvation, which goes back, and then he is my rock. Cross is the rock of my refuge, rock of our salvation. He opened the rock, and the waters gushed out like a river. That's rock of Oreb. Made the rock a pool of water, the flint a flowing well. Okay, the flint is probably Jacob's pillar stone. The stone the builders rejected has become the headstone of the corner. Now, everybody should realize that connection to the headstone, cornerstone, all those, the stumbling block, the stumbling stone, the stone, all mentioned in the New Testament, like Peter chapter 1, or 1 Peter chapter 2 is what I'm trying to say. That whole section is very important. The stone the builders, okay, we got that. Isaiah, the rock poured out me rivers of oil. And then who laid the cornerstone on high, or the keystone on high, brought water from the rock. That was Jacob's pillar stone. Gave them water 40 years in the desert. That's Jacob's pillar stone. Or these other mentioned just above where he got rocks out of the clefts in the rock, it said. So those are all the mentions. And that is an old chart, because actually that word shield is used in King James, and I didn't write it on here. I don't know what to do. I guess I could go back and edit this. There's a word shield. Here. I don't want to mess this up, so let's just, if you got a Bible, you can go back and look real quick. I'm just going to look real quick on 2 Samuel chapter 22, because you use the word shield, like you said, in King James, and I use a Farrar for sometimes I miss important stuff. I use the Farrar. The Lord is my rock, fortress, deliverer, I will trust. Okay, it's 22:3. So let me see where 22:3 is. God is my rock, salvation, tower, refuge.
In him will I trust.
I didn't
He
write
is
it
my
on
shield.
There. Yeah, it says shield in 22:3. You see that? Okay, so that's the first mention of shield that ties all three things together in one verse. In fact, it's the only one that uses shield and rock and gives you the idea we're talking about Yahweh or Christ, because it is Christ. And there's no problem using the term Christ in Genesis. The reason for that is, if you go to the New Testament, the first thing you read, it starts out the first verse, Christ, the son of David. Christ, the son of Abraham. It starts out that way. Christ is not even born, but your first verse in the New Testament starts out with the word Christ. In fact, it uses it again. There's no point in saying, well, we can't say this is Christ back here. You know, it's symbology. No, it's the entity, and you can do it because the New Testament starts out Christ before it talks about Emmanuel being born. Understand?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah,
so we don't really
concur.
need that chart anymore. All right. So at any rate, that's a very usable chart. I've got all the cross references that you need. And up here in John, here's another confirmation. John 8:58. Christ said, before Abraham was born, I am, which means I exist, or I exist and bring all things into existence. Really, the Father, Son, and the Spirit are all different parts of the same entity, different manifestations. And here it is. Let us make men, you see. It's talking about Yahweh, the Father and Son. So you can't really separate them. And then in Exodus 33:20, no one has at any time looked upon the face of God and lived. So that's kind of contradictory. So what he's saying is, as far as the creator, if you're talking to the Father, the actual creator, then no, you can't see his face. However, his representative as Christ, you can see, because people saw him born and they witnessed it. You see what I'm saying? So it's just a different manifestation of the same entity. Yeah. Now, the important thing here is Galatians 3:15 or 3:16. This is your only quote which ties to the first verse, Christ, the son of Abraham. If you look at the first verse of the New Testament, this is the cross reference. To Abraham and his heir, the promises were decreed, an individual, your heir, who is Christ. Okay, so here again, the shield. All right, so let's go back to what we were doing. Now, I've kind of lost my train of thought, but we've covered the important part.
Yeah, if I had
I was going to go back to
about the beasts.
Yeah, I was going to go back to the beast and show you how all this ties together.
Okay.
So we were talking about the two wings of an eagle. So I don't want to go to all these verses because we'd be here all day. But if you notice the two wings of an eagle, then who were these two wings? Okay, well, when you back up here in Revelation and go back to the two witnesses, everybody's getting these two witnesses wrong. First of all, when you read, since you have your Bible, go back to Revelation chapter 11. And here, I'll just pull mine up and we'll just do it here together. If you back up to Revelation chapter 11, you'll notice what it says about these two witnesses. Okay, well, here, let's start at 5. If any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth. So fire comes out and devours their enemies. So these people have enemies. They can shoot fire. If any hurts them, he must in this manner be killed. All right. Well, wait a minute. Weren't these two witnesses killed? Later on, just a few verses later, weren't these two witnesses killed? All right. Well, right here it says if anybody hurts them, they'll be killed. They'll be wiped out by fire. Isn't that what it says? Yeah. All right. Well, why didn't that happen? That is what's happening. It's describing. We can't disconnect all these chapters. So it says they have the power to shut heaven. Really, what does that mean? Well, people would say, I don't know. They're spiritual entities. Blah blah blah. Let's read a little more. Not reign in the days of their prophecy. Who prophesies except Christian people with the power of God? Who gives prophecy? No one, unless it's false prophecy, right? And have power over waters to turn them to blood. When the waters turn to blood, think about that, and to smite the earth with plagues as often as they will. All right. So when they shall finish their testimony, the beast comes out of the bottomless pit, make war against them, and shall overcome them and kill them. All right, well, just above, it said if anybody hurts them, they'll burn them with fire. So how do you reconcile those two ideas? You see what I'm saying? Just reading it is hard to reconcile those two ideas. Well, the plagues are identified earlier. We'll go back to that in chapter 9. It talks about plagues over there, and then it identifies what the plagues look like. Now, shutting heaven is another thing, but and it keeps you from having rain. Doesn't rain. Well, we do have technology to start rain, and we have technology to start rain, and we export that technology. In fact, the UIA, I think, is using one of our devices to make rain in the desert. Now, everybody will say, well, that was back during Elijah's day. He called on God and didn't rain. Well, okay. Yeah, there's that too. But we have technology. We actually export our technology. It's called the harp. We have multiple harps. Do you understand what the harp is?
Yeah.
Yeah. You heard of that?
Yeah, I do. I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have. And I want to ask you a question related to this verse about the ability to shut heaven. And do you recall, and I'm trying to think, I think it was in Matthew where the disciples, they were out on a boat and the storm came and they were afraid. And Christ kind of got a little testy with them.
Yeah.
And he says, how long am I going to be with you? And as if they had the power to stop that storm.
They did. They did. And that's why Christ was aggravated with them.
Yeah.
The reason they had the power to do it is because that's what the word Israel means. The Israel means power with God. That comes from that struggling with the angel. And then when he gave them the word Israel, that meant power with God or ruling with God. You can look at it both ways. And so they had that power as Israelites. And being with Christ, by that point, they should have understood who he was and that he was the one who gave them that power, because he gave them power to go out and lay hands on people and heal people. That's power with God. So they had the power, but they still didn't comprehend that all they had to do was take that power and use it in his name. You understand?
Right. Okay, so let me ask you this. The those of us who are Israelites today are rulers with Yah. And so we have that power. Would we not be able to speak to the wind? Hello? Uh-oh. I think I lost you.
No, I'm here. I'm just, I was getting a drink of water.
Oh, okay. Would we, okay, your picture went off, so I thought the weather got you. Speaking of the weather, anyway, so would we not have the power to speak to the wind, to speak to the rain, and have an effect upon it?
Oops. All right. No, I've got buttons here for everything. So if I can pop in and out or turn my
Okay.
mic off, I like doing it that way because it's just so much easier dealing with the software side. Well, technically, if we were calling on this power with God and we were doing, I mean, you got to be doing the things he tells you to do. And I don't mean doing the things as just an individual person, I'm doing the things, but yes, it does apply to individual people. Keep in mind the shield, the rod, those are personal things that he gave Abraham. He says, I will shield you. Well, he wasn't talking about his children at that second, even though it does apply. The point is, he gave Abraham a prophecy that he would shield him, and he shielded him his whole life. He did the same thing for Isaac, did the same thing for Jacob. And this is what I was getting to about the two witnesses. And then where did it go from Jacob? Where did that power with God go from Jacob? Do you remember? They're called the two witnesses. They're called the two witnesses.
Joseph, and then through Joseph to Ephraim and Manasseh.
There you go. He laid his hands, and what did he do? He gave a specific blessing to Ephraim and Manasseh and told them one would be a great nation and one would be a commonwealth of nations. So in other words, they would be over, spiritually over, with that power with God that he had. He passed it to them to be over those nations and to utilize that power with God. But what pastor is telling you that? Do you know, you even know of one pastor besides myself and Pastor Ramsey and, maybe Eli, but I mean, how many people do you know that actually even know these old prophecies? I've been teaching, trying to tie all these prophecies together because they start right there. They started Genesis 15 or, chapter 12 in reality. But the point is they start there with the promise of Abraham. They continue all the way to the end of Revelation. That is the Bible. There's no change. There's no getting away from the Abrahamic covenant because it's only to his people. And you just have other people who are taking that, running with it and say, hey, we're God's chosen and therefore we can do this and that and the other. But what they're trying to do is their God is actually the Satan mentioned in chapter 12 of Revelation. They're trying to do it through technology, which is what we're doing now. So what I was getting at with this power to rain or power to shut the heaven, we do have that power. We can do that right now. We can kill the rain with that harp, and we have multiple harps, and we export the technology. But usually we use it to make it rain, not to stop it to rain. Right.
But David, my question is, I think we have that power even if we don't have harp. That's my, if
no, that's not what I'm saying.
I'm saying storm coming our way, hurricane.
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the people running our country are trying to do the same thing, but do it without Christ. They're trying to do it by technology. We have it through
gotcha.
By the fact that we worship Christ. If you don't worship Christ, you don't have that power. But they're trying to, that's what Satan's doing. He's trying to utilize, because you notice in Revelation, he uses all these kings. So he's trying to do it by force and use technology, which is a failed way of making things happen. And that is what's going to happen. In fact, let's just look at it because that's the end of it, and then we'll come back. Okay. Let's go over to chapter 17. Go down to the end of chapter 17. All right, when you get down to the end of chapter 17, well, let's start about, all right, well, I don't know. Let's just start at 7. Let's kind of explain the whole thing. The angel said to me, Why do you marvel? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman. Okay. So it was a mystery, but now it's not going to be a mystery. The beast that carrieth her. So this beast is this government who has all these other empires. So they're doing it by force. So they've got these empires, or some of these empires, right there at the beginning of chapter 13. 7 heads and 10 corns. The heads are just military headquarters, continuity of government, things like that. And the 10 horns are kings. Horns are kings. The beast is the military, conquering government. In other words, was and is not, shall ascend out of the pit. A bottomless pit we'll have to come back to. That's over in chapter 9. Go into perdition. So in other words, they're going to be destroyed. And that's what it said about the 2 witnesses, that they would burn them. They would burn them with fire. Okay. That they'll dwell on earth, shall wonder whose names were not written in the book. So if you're not written in the book of life, and you go along with this military empire, then you're going to go along with it being burned, which is what you see at the end of chapter 19. Book of life and the foundation of the world. So this book of life started at the beginning when basically you read about it in Exodus. But what he's talking about there in Exodus, you have 2 groups of Israelites at Mount Sinai. There was the leadership of Israel who were sent into Saudi Arabia, down into the south part, or maybe only midway. And they were sent there to die, although all of Israel had to go. So he separated the 2 groups of Israel at Mount Sinai. One group understood these prophecies, the Abrahamic covenant, and they were willing to follow his law. The other group said they would follow his law, but they didn't. That's one of his parables of the New Testament. They said they followed his law, but then they didn't, and they rejected it. He sent them into the desert 40 years, but he kept their children. All right, so that's what we're talking about. 2 groups of Israelites. We're not talking about Edomites and other groups of people. We're talking about Israelites and judgment on Israel, all right? He brings other nations against you to judge you. That's what's going on here in Revelation. Let's continue. All right, so number 9 then, I guess. Oh, well, it says, behold the beast that was, is not, yet is. Here's the mind, has the wisdom. 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And the mountains are just the government. So it's in control of 7 governments. You can do a topical on that, and I could prove that point. But at any rate, those not come. When he comes, he must continue a short space. So if you look at the beast in Revelation, look at the numbering of the beast. When we're where we were at the 2nd beast, but we were talking about, hey, wait a minute, there's 4 beasts back here at the beginning of chapter 13. So if we're over here at 13, what was that, 13, 12, or 13, that should be 5 beasts or 6 beasts or something like that. But if you look at the numbers, there's no 5th beast. It doesn't number a 5th and a 6th beast. It just goes to the 7th. So we'll come back to that. All right, so 7 heads, and they are 7 kings. Well, right there, kings sit over kingdoms, which are countries or empires. Understand? That's verse 10. 5 are fallen, 1 is.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, 5? All right, which 5 is it talking about? Now, I understand that we're thinking this is all back here in all these historical kingdoms, but these aren't historical here in Revelation. The historical part of it is that the 8th beast back there in Daniel is going to be this 8th beast that we get here. But actually, there's 11 beasts here in Revelation if we look closer, and maybe we can cover that. 1 is coming. He must continue a short space. That's verse 10. So the 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is. So 5 empires who had kings over them are fallen. That's what it's really telling you there. That's going to connect back to 13. And the beast that was and is not, he's the 8th and of the 7 and goeth into perdition. That's your connection back to Daniel, that 8th kingdom. And the 10 horns are 10 kings. So there's another group of 10 kings with 10 horns. Now, when you get to that, receive no kingdom as yet. Well, first of all, they're kings. So kings sit over kingdoms. They have kingdoms, In other words, they're part of these empires that are being used back here by Satan in this attempt to conquer Christ, let's say, but they fail. They're expecting this satanic kingdom. That's what they're expecting. So they're all going to come together at one point for 1 hour to conquer Christ, and Christ is going to destroy them. Let's look at that. 10 horns, receive no kingdom, but receive power as kings 1 hour. That's still in 12. So in 1 hour, you have all these empires that are going to be in existence with the beast. We read in 13, they have one mind, shall give their power and strength into the beast. So they're all going to come together, make war with the Lamb, all right? And the Lamb shall overcome them. So for 1 hour, they're going to have a battle, and then they're going to lose. For he is Lord of lords. So it tells you the Lamb, King of kings. They are with him are called, chosen, faithful. So those are the people defined in 12:17 and chapter 14. You know, it talks about the people who are conquerors. That's us. And he said to me, the waters for the whore are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. All right, but it's not talking about the whole world. The whole world is not being judged. It's the holy people are being separated from these people who are in control of the holy people, in control of their empire, which we elected them. And we're talking about the holy people again, right? 10 horns, verse 16, they shall hate the whore, make her desolate, and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Remember that? Fire from chapter 11. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom into the beast. Wait a minute. God did that? We thought they did it. No, right here it says God put it in their hearts to fulfill his will. So God told them, look, join with this guy, which is Satan. Go ahead and join with him. And that's going to fulfill his purpose. So he impelled them to basically, but of course it says that they came back and destroyed the beast, right, with fire. So he put it in their hearts to join with Satan. They got conquered an hour later, but they didn't worship Christ. And that's why he impelled them to do this and to come in battle against him so that he could destroy all of them, which is what he does at the end of chapter 19. God did it. You see that? And the sea, if you backed up, was a sea of people, although there's actually a sea of water as well. So just because it uses a term, here's a mistake people make. Just because it uses a term that sometimes is used as an allegory doesn't mean it's always used as an allegory or a metaphor. It might be used as an allegory or metaphor most times, but then other times it might just be used as what it really is, a sea or a mountain. You see what I'm saying? Just because it says it's a mountain doesn't mean it's always that. But a lot of times that stuff is used as allegory. So you have to read real close and then do topical studies to determine which ones are allegories or parables or whatever, which ones aren't. But if you just read that, the woman, this is verse 18, is that great city. So the woman is this mystery, the great harlot that started with in chapter 17. At the end, it tells you who it is. It's a city. It was a mystery. So what city is a great city is a mystery which reigneth over the kings of the earth. What city reigneth over a king and has all of these kings, but it's a city. Now, I realize people look at this and say, well, you know, couldn't that be the Pope and that city and blah, blah, blah. That city doesn't control governments. Your control of your government is done at the financial level. It's who funds the government, controls the government. The government is not controlled by, you know, because they're antichrist kind of people, most of them that are the ones in control because look at what they're doing. So they're misleading people, they're lying to people on TV, which is your main source of lies. And and then it's defined as a great city. Well, there's more definition if you go into chapter 18 about who this city is. And when you read chapter 18, you can get, it's not talking about the Pope in chapter 18. How do you read chapter 18 and say that's the Pope? That can't be the Pope. But you got to go through and read it. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but if you read the whole chapter 18, there's no Pope there in chapter 18. It's clearly a city or a place. There's only one city ever that controls the whole world right now. Who is that city? Yeah, people would say, well, oh, it's New York. No, it's not New York. New York doesn't control anything. New York is controlled by who? You know?
Mm-hmm.
What great city controls New York?
New York would be controlled by the United Nations?
No, money. Money. We're
what
talking
city
money.
Controls money?
The city that controls the money all over all the world. There's only one city that actually controls the money. Now, I got a little bit of rain, so I'm getting unstable.
Okay, well, there's the Federal Reserve that controls, and that would be, was it Washington, D.C.?
There's 12 Federal Reserves. There's Federal Reserves in different countries. And so who controls New York? Who controls New York? That's also a great city that controls all the finances of the world. There's only one city. It's the city of England, where all of your banking takes place, is in the city of England. Now, they have the Bank of International Settlements. They control the Fed. They control a number of things. But the main control over all the earth financially is the city of London. And I don't mean the London where the people live. I mean the London where the little 1 mile square area that's called the City of London, which is not part of England. It's a whole different ball game when you walk into the City of London. It's completely sovereign from the rest of England. You go in the City of London, everything comes from right there. And then it branches out over all the world. Go ahead.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
That's described.
I was always
at the end of chapter.
Yeah, I guess most of the time I have.
Go ahead.
I get what I was going to say is that in most instances I've read where that great city was always referred to as Jerusalem, and we know who controls Jerusalem.
Yeah, but they don't control all the money. See, this is all about money, controlling all these empires. To get these empires, they're funding all the wars. All that money comes from banking. All that money to build your weapons and to, because it's all finance. Everything here in America is borrowed money. We don't. We're not using we have the ability under the Constitution to have our own money, but we're borrowing our money from the Federal Reserve at 30% interest. So we don't have our own money. Go ahead.
Right, and isn't that money contained in these trusts, these international trusts, like owned by the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and so forth?
They're using the money to yes, they're using the money to go out, and they basically own the land. That's why you pay taxes. If you didn't have to pay them taxes, then you could be an owner. But the people in America and elsewhere, but specifically here because of our constitutional and our unalienable rights, we would have the ability to own land without having to pay taxes on it. And, you know, everybody's going to start a big thing about it. But I actually have a U.S. Supreme Court case that was won on my website. If you scroll down, you'll see the Barbara Martin case, and that explains unalienable rights and the source of it. And then that's how you stand up for your rights if you went into federal court. People don't realize they go into federal court, it's just all assumptions, and you lose. They win 97% of their cases for a reason. And even those other 3% are not people who were trying to stand up and present that they have unalienable rights, and that's why the federal court can't, bring these charges, because, they don't apply to them. But there might be 100 people in the United States that understand the Barbara Martin case and can walk into court and present evidence that they're a de jure citizen, they have unalienable rights, and that the charges being brought against them don't apply to them. But they, in the United States, there's just no education. When you go to all your schools are about dumbing people down. They're not about educating them. They're educating you to have a job so that you can work for the beast your whole life. That's what you're being educated for. You're not actually being educated about what's true. And then, of course, they want to kick Christ out of the whole thing, even though it was all started by Christian ethics. All right, I found the verse, so let's back up. If you got your Bible, go back to chapter 16. Scroll down to let's go to about 18. And there were voices, thunders, lightnings. That's how it started, by the way, back in chapter 8, right before the first trumpet. That's how the first trumpet. In fact, that's the first thing you're going to see is exactly what it says here. You're going to see the same thing. Voices, thunders, lightnings, and then a great earthquake. That's how it starts. So you're going to see an earthquake first. Since as was not men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. So it's going to be a greater earthquake than's ever existed in the time of man. That's how it starts in like 8:5 or something like that. Okay. And then the great city, verse 19, was divided into three parts.
Right.
And the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came into remembrance. All right. That was over in chapter, well, it's in the next one. Harlot is in Babylon. To give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. Here again, these are both allegories. The island is when you have a military base that, you heard the allegory, don't be an island unto yourself. In other words, don't think you could just do everything all by yourself and you don't need anybody. Yeah. That's what an island is. It's like an off-grid military base. It has food underground. It has everything it needs to continue on and on and on. Okay, that's what an island. And then the mountains, of course, were your main military forts, or we call them forts typically, or bases. All right. And there fell upon men a great hail, every stone about the weight of a talent. Mine says that's 51 pounds, I think. And men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague was exceedingly great. That's not where it split. It tells you it splits into three pieces. I thought it was going to do that at the end, but obviously it wasn't that one. But it was somewhere. I thought it was that one. All right. Well, I don't want to go through all this stuff again.
Wasn't it over in 17?
It does say it here somewhere that it splits into three pieces. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was maybe back in 17 where we were at before.
Yeah, it split into three pieces.
There was a great earthquake.
Yeah, well, that earthquake thing is repeated, but well, let me just back up a little bit because I'm pretty sure it was there, but I got it highlighted, but I'm looking in a King James and I don't have everything highlighted. Otherwise, I'd just look right to it. Now I find it because I got it highlighted. When I don't have things highlighted, then I have to read everything because I can't remember where everything is.
I'm looking for it too.
Well, I saw it. And
maybe
I know
between the two of us we'll find
three pieces, and I thought that was it, but obviously it isn't. At any rate, you can find it. That's not the most relevant thing, but it is in here. Might be at the end of 18, some down here. Oh, okay, but at 18, here's the other point. The light of the candle shall no more shine in thee. So here's the description of this great city that was destroyed. Voice of the bridegroom and the bride should be heard no more. So see, that's not Rome. Everybody's not going over there and being married. Thy merchants were the great men of the earth, for by thy sorceries all nations were deceived. All right, and what is sorceries? If you look up the word, it's used 4 times in Revelation, and it comes from the root word pharmakia, which is your word for pharmacy. If you just look up any dictionary, you'll see the root word for pharmacy is pharmakia, and they deceive the whole world by sorcery or by pharmakia, which is pharmaceutical drugs, and they're doing it right now. It's right in your face right now. What's happening, what it describes in chapter 13 is happening right here. It's all going to come to a head, and the way I taught it, maybe I was correct, but the way I taught it is that the 7 years of tribulation started September 17th to December, between our 2 full eclipses, and I'm the only person, oddly enough. I went out to that full eclipse over there in Illinois. I forget the little town there, and there were like 100 people that were all going to show up at the exact conjunction, because it only conjuncts at one place. And so there was like 100 people that were all going to show up. It's right in somebody's front yard. And I pulled up, and kind of early, because I told Eli and some of the others, they better get there early or they might not get there. Well, sure enough, they didn't make it. No one else made it because they all got stuck in traffic, because they planned on being there at like 10 a.m., which was way too late. I was there at 6 a.m. and I got there, and if you got there by 8, you wouldn't have made it.
Gotcha.
So I ended up, but then they didn't want a bunch of people coming in their yard. So I ended up actually blocking everybody, because a couple of people did try to come in, and they had already said they didn't want anybody else in, but they let me film. And so I did it for them. And of course, I got the only conjunction video on the web. It's kind of amazing that it worked out that way. But so I believe that those conjunction video, that 7-year cross, and actually it does that 3 times within 100 years, but the spot where the conjunction is moves each time. It moves closer to the Atlantic each time they cross. So it crosses 3 times in this next, during this century. However, I said, well, it looked to me like we were already halfway in. So I said it was we were already halfway, because that's what it looked like. I was expecting everything to come down the pipe like within the next, any moment, because it already looked like we were there. But then later on, when they came along and in September came in, I said, well, really it looks like we're starting right now. So it's probably the beginning. And the text really kind of gives us more of that thought that was really the beginning. At any rate, I taught it that way. If it turns out, then that's the way it is. And I think it is turning out, because I think right now we're 2.5 years in, and right now it looks like things are playing out that, we're looking at the mark of the beast. Did you see that video on Bill Gates' patent the other day? That was just from last week. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did watch that. Yeah.
06,
Yeah,
06, 06.
Yeah, I watched it.
Who would come up with a patent number of 666? You say, well, now we have one. And what is it about? It's about identifying people and putting them into a transaction scheme where all their money is digital, and how they will follow you. The interesting thing about that patent, if you look at it again, it was Kevin Shipp that did that whole layout, which he did a really good job. But if you look at it again, the way of identifying people is not part of the patent. The part of the patent is that however they identify you, that then you can be paid, or then you can be compensated, or you could be cut out of the system completely, because they can identify you, and you don't have to have a mark on your hand. Technically, you don't have to, because we have invisible barcodes that are laser etched, which they can put on your hand or your forehead. That's already in operation. We have credit cards with chips in them that can identify it. We have facial recognition, which is in widespread use. And that facial recognition is so good, you can put glasses on, put a hat on, and put a COVID mask on, and it'll still identify it. It takes a little longer, but it'll still do it. And maybe not 100%. But the point is, we already have the technology. You don't need a number, but the number is so that you can be part of the system where you can get paid. You can go to work. And that's what they're selling it as. When you go to work, you just walk in the door, the identification systems identify it. One of the older biometric actually measured your fingers, the length of your hand. Your hand has like 170 different things about everybody's hand, which is better than a fingerprint, actually. Better than a fingerprint to use the whole hand. We have hand readers. I used to sell those years ago. Rand Corporation, I think, developed those. Huh. Put your whole hand in between these spikes, and it reads it, and it's accurate. I mean, it doesn't make mistakes. So we have all the technology, and this is what Bill Gates' patent is. It's a Microsoft patent, and it just came out a week ago. So we're there. We're there. They're going to lock you out. They're going to use this. It's already built into Microsoft 10. If you go look into your operating system, look at your drivers built into your operating system, you'll find drivers for things, well, like biometric. You'll find drivers that are there for biometric connections where you can plug in a hand reader, or you can plug in a fingerprint reader, or whatever. Or you can, there's payment system drivers. So if you have a online payment system, like swiping a credit card, already built into your computer. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's like your phone. You can put your finger on a sensor and it'll unlock your phone for you, or your bank account, or a number of different things like that.
But what they're doing is they're getting everybody. They're getting everybody. You don't have to have the phone. You don't have to have it on your computer. They could just look at you and they know who you are. That's what I'm trying to get at.
By the way, I found it was Revelation 16, verse 19. Where the great city is divided into 3 parts. Revelation 16:19.
Yeah, I'm getting it. Okay. Yeah, voices, things.
Okay.
Well, I guess maybe I said that. The great city is divided into 3 parts. The cities of the nation. Oh yeah, I did read that. I did read it. I read that verse. I don't know why I didn't see that. It's divided into 3 parts. Yeah, well, and it talks about smoke rising from Mystery Babylon. Well, maybe it says it here too. Somewhere it tells you about smoke rising from there forever and ever. That's what it says.
Is there any connection between the 3 parts and the 3 unclean spirits?
Well, I think it's a representation.
Which is up in verse.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. Go over to 18. When you go down to 18, approximately, start about verse 8. Well, 6. Let's go back. Okay, 5. Let's start at 5. Her sins have reached into heaven. God has remembered her iniquities because she got all these people into following Satan. Reward her, she rewarded. Double unto her according to her works. The cup with her filled to double. How much she glorified herself, lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her, for she has said in her heart, I sit a queen. Okay, there's another identifier. And am no widow, and shall not see no sorrow. Therefore her plagues shall come in one day. There you go, the one day again. Death and mourning and famine shall be utterly burned with fire. Strong is the Lord who judges her. And they'll see the smoke of her burning in verse 9. Stand afar off for the fear of her torment. The great city Babylon, that mighty city, in 1 hour is thy judgment come. So all that, we've read that over and over. The merchants. So it was a city of merchants. Weep and mourn. No man buyeth their merchandise because there is none. Then it tells you what the merchandise is. Gold, silver, stones, pearls, fine linen, purple silk. See, that doesn't apply to Rome. None of that applies to Rome. Precious wood, brass, iron, marble, cinnamon, odors, ointment, frankincense, blah, blah, blah. Just read it. So it's talking about merchandise and merchants is about money. Merchants, which were made rich by her, verse 15, stand afar off, weeping and wailing. Great city, clothed in fine linen, purple scarlet, decked with gold, precious stones, and pearls. Not Rome. For in 1 hour, so great riches has come to naught, and every shipmaster. This is a city where ships bring in their merchants and their goods, you see. and all the company in ships. So
Yeah.
it's a city where all these ships come in and bring their goods. Sailors, trade by sea, stood afar off, cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto the city? So it's the only one that's like that one. The only one, verse 18. Cast dust, saying, alas, the great city, made rich by all the ships and the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour she's made desolate. Just for her. So everybody, the Christian people, the holy apostles, the prophets, God has avenged you for her, because all this judgment, I've got a chart on judgment. All the judgment in Revelation is on really two things. It's on the judgment over the people who are murdering the prophets, because it says that over and over, and just look at my chart. And then it's also on the holy people for allowing themselves to basically be the host nation for all these things to happen. So in other words, we didn't exercise our power with God that we were given, that would have, we would have, just like how we were formed, if we would have kept on the way that our nations were formed, exercising that power over our government, okay, and maintaining our unalienable rights. If we'd have kept to that and our kids hadn't been laxed, and then our churches laxed for teaching, and then they eventually went to seminaries where they were lied to. Now they're passing on the lies that they learned, thinking that they're so smart. All right, well, we had just done what we were supposed to do. All right, here you go, 21. That's 18:21. And a mighty angel took up a stone, like a millstone, cast it in the sea. Thus with violence shall a great city be thrown down, and shall be found no more. 22, voice harpers, blah, 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 no more be heard, no craftsman, no millstone, light of a candle shall not shine, so there'll be no more teaching of Christ in that city, even though there wasn't hardly any anyway. And the voice of the bridegroom, bride, heard no more. Merchants were the great men of the earth. So it's a city that has the greatest merchants on earth running through there. For by thy sorceries all nations were deceived, and we did read that. For in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints, all that were slain. So the city is divided in three parts, is utterly destroyed with fire. So on. Next question.
Okay, well, I had asked a question in the beginning, and I'm using a Socratic method because, I mean, I believe I know what the answer is, but I just want to lay a foundation here. And I asked about the who is they in Revelation 13:14, where it says they worship the dragon. So those are the earth dwellers, no? Are you still there?
Yeah.
Lost
I
your
just had to
picture.
get another drink of water.
The earth dwellers, which and are they the house of Israel and Judah and the house of Ephraim and Manasseh? Is that who we're talking about, or are we talking about the whole world when it comes to they worship the beast? And again, my next question would be, who did they worship? Which is the dragon, and maybe we can explain a little bit. Yeah, in a nutshell, if you can answer it in a nutshell, because I got a series here of questions leading up to something.
All right, let's go back. 14, and
if we just briefly lay a foundation of who are they and who.
Yeah, well, it starts out that they're these people who, just back up, exercise all the power of the first beast. So it's people that exercise the power of the beast to make people worship the first. And there it says first beast.
Being
yeah,
mentioned.
There it says first beast. Whose deadly
wound. Exactly.
All right, but his wound was healed, so it was a beast, but it was healed. When you heal a beast, since a beast is conquering a military empire, when you heal it, what you do is you go to a continuity of government. Now, I described that in great detail in another video. At any rate, and deceiveth them. So these people who is talking about deceive those who dwell on earth by means of the miracles which ye have power to do in the sight of the beast. So whatever miracles are going on, it's these people who are doing these miracles that deceive everybody on earth, but they don't deceive the holy. They deceive everyone else by saying, okay, well, this guy, number one, no one can beat this guy because why? It's 4 different empires right there at the beginning of chapter 13. So these 4 empires, the 2 witnesses are 2 empires, United States and the UK, under control of Ephraim and Manasseh, but they're right now they've joined with the beast. And in fact, they are the first beast, because I didn't mention that. We never got to that, but in chapter 11, the first beast that's described is this group in chapter 11 who can stop the rain or give rain, who have a conquering military, who are out conquering their enemies. That's what a beast is. So the 2 witnesses are 2 beasts with the wings of an eagle, which makes them these 2 from Ephraim and Manasseh. However, right here, it's deceiving all who dwell on earth. That's verse 14. And they have miracles to do that, which is whatever the miracles are. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess what the question I had sent to you is not the second beast of Revelation 13, a one world religious system, because it looks like a lamb and speaks like a dragon. And
no, that's the description of
so
the
my
2
question
witnesses.
is,
That's the description of the 2 witnesses, because in other words, it's a beast just like in 11, but it's powered by the lamb. So it has lamb people in it, people who worship the lamb. The only 2 empires who worship the lamb is represented by the United States and the UK. Understand? Go ahead.
Okay, now would the 2 witnesses cause the earth dwellers to worship the dragon?
Yes, because they're ruled by
Revelation
the dragon.
13:12.
Yes, they're ruled by the dragon, because that's where we're at. That's where we're at right now. However, most of the Christian people in America, they don't want this dragon to be in control, but let's just look at the way it is. It is in control, and because, like I said, they didn't keep control. So England, whatever religious Christian people you have there, they're not controlling their military, and the people that are up there, of course, are not even elected. So they have no control. In the United States, we had control when we started, but we gradually just turned that control over to people. I mean, basically, we elected people that were what we used to call the mafia. That's who we elect. We just elect them because of the TV says so. We see we get all our information from TV, but all that TV is fake news. There's nothing truthful on the TV. If it was truthful, it would be, these channels would be registered as media, as news channels. They're not registered as news channels. They're registered as entertainment channels. So what is truthful about entertainment? It doesn't matter that it's news. It's entertainment news, like Saturday Night Live. It's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the way they escape liability.
Right.
But anyway, okay, because I guess what I'm trying to identify here is, Revelation 13:12, it says, and he, which is the second beast that came out of the sea, he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. Now, that word worship, are they looking at that beast as a god, or and we know that it's actually Satan? They worship the dragon. And this just tells me that it kind of it denotes a religious theme. And so it seems like this beast has the military part, and it's also got this religious part. And we came to this country to get away from England because they were forcing religion on people, and we wanted freedom of religion. So it just seems like the second beast is more of a religious theme to it. And I think that's important to note because right now, I don't know, did you see the videos I sent to you about the Noahide law? Or
Yeah.
do you have a
Yeah,
chance to
I've
look at
already
those?
seen those. There's a bunch of them. Yeah, I've already seen them.
Okay. Okay. Yep. And so it just seems to me that the second beast described in Revelation 13 has this religious theme, and it's kind of like a one world religion,
Right.
where they worship the dragon. And I
Right.
think that's being foisted upon us now as well in this
Exactly.
last days.
All right, that's called
That
the false prophet. When you're over here in Revelation, it's called the false prophet. So Satan is the person in control, controlling everything using money. And people want to say, well, it's not necessarily a person or whatever. I tell you what, you'll figure it out after the fact when it's too late. It really doesn't matter. It tells you who it is here in chapter 12. It tells you it's that old accuser, which is the Satan from the Old Testament. You can go back to Job. I don't know where you want to figure out who Satan is. You can do a topical on Satan, the devil, the accuser, and all these terms that it lists right there in chapter 12 and come to your own conclusion. But here's my conclusion. Who was Christ talking to at the beginning of Matthew when he was at the end of his 40 years in the desert, who offered him all of these kingdoms? Now, Christ didn't say, you don't have that authority, because if this entity did not have the authority to offer him what he offered, then he would have just attacked him on that point, because he was just said, well, you don't have that authority. But whoever this is did have that authority. Who was it?
Satan.
Oh, but
The
who
devil,
was
the
it?
serpent, the dragon.
Okay, but who was it? Was it a person? Was it an angel standing there in front of him? Was it just his mind speaking to him in his head? Was he imagining in it?
Okay. You mean, what was it?
Yeah.
Was it,
I
because
guess.
I remember, I think it was Danny was saying, oh, it was, yeah.
Right.
So I believe, like you, that it was the physical being, a walking, talking physical being.
And why would you think that? Because you get that from Genesis chapter 3. You get it back there from like Genesis 3:15 for one thing, because it says back there he has children. It says my children and your children, my seed, your seed, each one. So it's got to be an entity, a real physical entity. And when he's speaking to Christ, that physical entity, whoever it is he's talking to, has the power and the authority to offer Christ those kingdoms. It's not just in your head where there's seed, blah, blah, blah. It's of some type of physical entity that you don't want nothing to do with. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, and I want to also connect with, I think it's in Revelation 17, where it talks about the war in heaven. Let me see, I'm going to try to find it. I thought it was Revelation 12. It's Revelation 12. I'm going to read this one scripture where it talks about, waiting for my page to load here. And this would be a good subject for another, no, it is Revelation 12:3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. Oh.
Yeah, 12:3. It's
and then verse 4, and his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered to devour her child as soon as it was born. Now, if you think about this tail that drew a third part of the stars, these are those fallen angels, are they not? And they were cast to earth. And which means, and they were cast, I think it talks about it in Jude, it says they're bound in darkness, chains of darkness, until the great day of judgment, which hasn't happened yet. So that means they're still here. These third of these angels that were cast out of heaven are still here in earth. If think about that, and they got a king over them.
All right.
So that would make an interesting topic for the next meeting, maybe.
Well, I can explain that, and that goes back to how I came up with the idea that September 2017, there was a guy, and those videos are on my description. If you go to my older videos, or maybe even some of the newer ones, they have a description. You scroll down, there's links down there to the original video of Scotty Clark, who said that he had read this, and the point was, this is an allegory, but he says it's an allegory about what's actually in the stars. So he went with this, what's it called, Stellarium program, and you can pull up and see any position of stars and all, just blood moons. You see everything about, the sky in the Stellarium. And he said, okay, well, where would you see this particular alignment if it was part of the Mazareth, which was mentioned in Job, which is what you talked about. So he went through this program, and he only found one date which would match, but it comes up about every 7,000 years, I think is what he said. And this next one, that was in 2015, I think. So he says in the next one that would align would be September 23rd, 2017. And then the one on the dragon is another alignment of stars. And if you look at it, I can't remember all of it. Look at the video, it completely explains it. But the dragon is right below and to the right of the woman, the way they show it. It's Hydra, it's called Hydra, yeah. I forget all of it. But anyway, you can see it, it's represented by stars. But it's just a layout of stars. It's not astrology, it's astronomy. They're using astronomy, which you can look at the sky right now and you can see how the stars move. That's astronomy, not astrology. Completely different thing. They just use, it's just Satan's, duplication, where he takes something that Christ does and he duplicates it and makes a whole nother thing out of it. Astronomy. He says these stars would align, but he had to take some planets and blah, blah, blah. You look at it and it's like, okay, it made sense. A lot of other people checked his work. And I looked at about at least 20 different videos where they had done the same thing. They said, yeah, it could be that. That could be something else. But they agreed with them that that alignment didn't appear to happen except maybe every 7,000 years. Part of the alignment happens every year. So part of it. But if you put everything together, the crown of 12 stars, the woman laboring in birth, and all of that. So the woman, here again, if you apply it to scripture, the woman is actually Sarah, not Mary, as a lot of people have said. There's a prophecy, probably 17, it's probably chapter 17 of Genesis. There's a prophecy about Mary having all these kings would come from her loins, or however it states it. It says that to Abraham, but it also gives the exact same prophecy to Sarah. So in other words, all the 12 tribes would be birthed from Sarah. So the 12 crowns are those 12 tribes. Even though there's 13, there's 12 when you get in Revelation, and for various reasons. And it's just an allegory of this prophecy that starts in Genesis. So when I saw that, I said, okay, but we know where that is. That's the vision of Joseph. The symbology is the vision of Joseph. You go back to Joseph's second, the first vision or prophecy, it was a prophecy that he had, is where all his brothers would bow to him, which they did shortly later. Well, it might have been 20 years, but when he was leader of Egypt, they did bow to him. So that fulfilled the first vision. The second vision was a little more interesting because Jacob said, would me and your mother, applying him and his mother to the sun and the moon. He said, would me and your mother and your brothers all bow to you? And where did he get that idea? Where did Jacob get the idea that this vision about the sun and the moon would apply to him and Rachel? Where did he get that idea? And the stars would be his brothers. Where did Jacob get that idea from? Got any idea?
Um,
Ah, yeah, you
I'm
got to
trying
know
to think.
Genesis. This Old Testament stuff that none of the pastors want to teach because they think it's not relevant anymore. Yeah, it's the back there in Genesis. At any rate, you have to go back and you just got to read Genesis. All the stuff in Genesis ties together. It builds on the previous prophecies, the previous things. It says all just builds. And then when you get there, you realize that Jacob. Why would Jacob apply the sun and the moon to him and Rachel? And get this, Rachel had been dead for 10 years. Oh, all right. So what was he thinking? What was he thinking when he said that? If his mother had been dead for 10 years and Jacob's saying, would me and your mother bow to you? What was he really thinking? Because she'd been dead. What was he thinking in his mind when he made that statement? See, people got to think about that stuff. Where did he get all this idea? Well, he knew about redemption.
Mm-hmm.
He knew about the Nazareth. That came from Job. That's old. He knew about all that stuff. People think that all these Abraham, Isaac, Jacob were just, farmers. They didn't know anything, and they just, we're all educated now. They were just, they didn't know anything back then. I guess that's what they think. Actually, we've been going downhill since Abraham, not uphill. Yeah, it gives you a lot to think about. But that's where the symbology came from here. So the 12 stars then are his brothers, and we lost one, and that, I can explain that. So it's Jacob, Sarah.
Well,
Abraham and Sarah is who it applies to, or had the original prophecy. Go ahead.
Okay, well, the Revelation 12 that I read, where it's talking about the stars that were cast out of heaven, that's different than the 12 stars.
Well, I was talking about the first part. There's two prophecies. One's about Abraham and Sarah. Had prophecies over having children who became the 12 tribes. The second prophecy is about the devil, like you said, the great dragon, that's how it says it in mine, having 7 heads and 10 horns, which are duplicated in the next chapter. So there, these 7 heads and 10 horns, here again, are kings. So he has kings under his control, and 10 horns, which are also kings, 7 heads, which are headquarters. So those tend to represent the ones we saw up in, chapter 17, who at the very end are fighting against the Lamb, who is described as Christ in chapter 17. So again, are they all these fallen angels? They appear to be. I mean, it's a symbology here, it's an allegory here, but they appear to be, like I said, Satan appears to be some type of real person. When you look at him and talk to him, he probably just looks like a person. But he also has all these other angels that followed him. And as you said, they seem to be underground. And then you had this great earthquake. This is how things start. And then you had the pit of the abyss, which is chapter 9. And it's an angel who has the key that unlocks the pit of the abyss that appears to let these fallen angels out, who go to destruction, helping out. And these are the wonders. We read the wonders. So the wonders are when they're let out of the pit. And by the way, in 9:11, that is Satan coming out. By the way, Apollyon, because I stated that a little different before, but if you go back and look at it, this king, Abaddon, that's verse 11, 9:11, they had a king.
Abaddon and Apollyon, yeah.
The Greek term Apollyon. So
angel.
It's the same word, but Hebrew. Right, and it's an angel. So a fallen angel coming out of the pit, who does that sound like? And these other angels would be coming out with him. So and this great earthquake releases all of these entities, but Satan's in control. So here's where Satan comes out, and then in chapter 20 is where he goes back. Remember, in chapter 20, he puts them back into the pit, but he destroys apparently the rest of the angels, because then after that, only Satan is let loose and judged, and then he's thrown into the fire, which, by the way, is the sun. If you go back to 19 and look down around 1919, one angel has his foot in the sun. So he's putting all these souls or entities into the sun to destroy them. And then when you have the white throne judgment, or he finally gets rid of Satan and throws him into the sun. And then we're judged for our deeds, the ones that follow Christ to the end, which is all that meant. Follow him to the end. Don't give up on him. Will be, I think there's multiple levels of, your kings and priests, your Melchizedek kings are one thing, called conquerors and so forth. But then there's still got to be other just regular people. Maybe we're all, because when you're in chapter 14, it calls them the 144,000, and it kind of defines that in chapter 7 as well. But are you really going to say that there's only 144,000 people, Christian people left? That wouldn't be many, so that doesn't make sense. I would think they would just be the leadership. You have this 144,000 leadership, and then you still have a lot of other Christian people who are under these leaders. I mean, it's just like any other government. You have leaders, and then you have people that are just in their position, and then you have people who grow food, and then you have people that dig ditches or whatever. However, his people will be his people. All of his people will be in this New Jerusalem, so they'll be separate. Just like he said before, we're going to be separate from everybody else. They'll be separate, and then there'll be leaders who will go out and rule over the whole of earth as needed. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, actually, no, I need to go. This is so interesting. I wish I could stay. And when's your next meeting? Maybe you can let us know.
We do, we have teachers on Tuesday and Thursday, and I'm always looking for new teachers who want to argue their point. I mean, that's the whole thing. There's no gurus. I studied this, and I got this concept, but there's plenty of other good teachers who have different concepts, and I like to argue with other teachers because you always miss things. It's not like I said, there's no guru. Everybody's got their own viewpoint. Me and Danny have talked a lot, and actually, I think if we sat down side by side and looked at everything, we probably agree with 98%. But still, you have to have that Christian Israel viewpoint to be able to teach it all. You have to know these prophecies.
Okay, well, I was, like I said, I hadn't used Zoom before. And I wasn't sure if I see it doesn't look like it has the ability to type any kind of comments or anything.
It does,
which is
for the people that
unfortunate,
are on it.
If I was listening.
It has a chat. There's a chat at the bottom of your screen, approximately in the middle.
It does.
There's a chat.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the only place that you being coming in. Now, me as the host, I have multiple things I can do, but you as coming in secondarily, the chat. On the chat, you could chat with other people or to everyone at once. So you have a couple of options there. And then I control the screen. So if I want to make you full
so
screen,
I was thinking.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking, when you have your Thursday and Tuesday meetings, I'd like to sit in and listen and maybe, make some comments in the chat as opposed to engaging in any teaching. Would that be possible?
Yeah, sure. I can let you in. You'll be muted. I'll just have to mute you, and you can sit there and we'll look at the chat, because the chat will come to us, and every time you put something in there. And you can put links in there. I don't think they make them hot. In other words, clickable. I don't think they make them clickable links, because Zoom takes control of when it's and I understand it has to. It takes control of your browser. It takes control of your sound. It has to do that. In fact, it's kind of it's kind of in opposition to my black magic equipment over here that I'm using to do all my stuff. So I got that worked out, but you know,
Okay.
they're fighting each other. One's fighting the other because for control is basically. But yeah, if you come in, that's a faster way of going about it. I did the question and answer thing because,
Okay.
you know,
So,
I'll still continue with that. Just even if I only do a 5-minute show, I'll just continue with it. And just I'll use it as a way to keep people updated.
yeah, I'm
But
sure
I
I'll
would
have
like
more.
new teachers. So everybody that wants to invite
Yeah.
teachers, bring in new teachers, but come in on Tuesday or Thursday and I'll send you, I have your email, so I'll send you the links.
Okay, super. Well, thank you so much for having this Q&A. It's been very informative, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
All right.
God
Well,
bless. And
amen. You're still there. Go ahead. All right. Well, maybe she thought I cut her off. I didn't cut you off. I cut me off. I just wanted to put up my banner there before I closed out so everybody could see my email. And that's kind of the reason I did it that way. Oh, I see. She's still there. So at any rate, yeah, I'll give you the links to those. All right. So that was a
okay, and
really
I'll
good
see you.
meeting.
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed it greatly. All right, Yahuwah, bless you, and we'll see you next time.
All
I'm
right.
going to leave
Thanks.
now.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, it was a good meeting, and send me your email. I'll put you on. We'll go through your question and answers. Or, you know, I don't want trolls on my stuff, which is the reason I don't have any comments. When you put comments up, all you get is all these people that just, they don't even half the time, they don't look at any of your videos. They just have all these questions, which are answered in my videos 90% of the time. Things people answer, the ask are already on the videos that people just watch them. They don't want to watch it. They just want to come in and bug you and get an answer. They don't want to actually do any work. So thanks for coming to this meeting, and we'll see you on the Pastor Ramsey's, by the way, in case that's an idea. In case you wonder where that is, let me just exit out of here and go over there, and I can just key that in. And we can go over to Pastor Ramsey's YouTube channel. I'll have to bring it up here because I didn't have it up. Oh, no, I can't do that. Never mind. All right. It's godscovenantpeople.com. Godscovenantpeople.com. That take you right to his YouTube. I don't have it on the internet over there. All right. Thanks for watching.